We've all heard the concept that having a properly funded living trust avoids probate, but we often get asked just how exactly does that work? How does me signing that trust document avoid my entire estate having to go through probate? Well, to put it kind of simply, your living trust doesn't die with you. Hi, I'm Andrew Bethel, and today we're going to be talking about how exactly a living trust avoids probate, because it's actually a very common question that we get in our office, because we've all heard that phrase, but there is a little more going on under the hood as to how that occurs. So, a trust itself is a legal entity that holds assets for the benefit of someone else, so a beneficiary. Now, to put it plainly, in the way I like to describe it to my clients, it's a pretty simple explanation. You can think of a trust as a bucket, and the assets that you put into your trust, think of it as water you would put in that bucket. Now, you need someone to watch over the bucket to make sure it doesn't spill or leak, but ultimately the water in that bucket is going to be used for the benefit of a beneficiary. They're going to water some plants, put out a fire, drink the water, doesn't matter. In essence, a trust is something that you put your stuff into in order to safeguard it for a beneficiary. Now, the operative word in that initial definition was entity, because a trust is a legal entity. Kind of like a corporation or an LLC, these are things that are separate from you. Now, revocable living trust, to oversimplify the situation, while you are alive and with your revocable living trust, it's still considered as part of you when it comes to tax considerations. So having a corporation changes your tax outlook, but having a revocable living trust during your lifetime doesn't change anything. You can title your assets in your trust, so you're funding the trust, you're putting that water in that bucket, but it's not going to change your taxes, your tax bracket, or anything like that. The actual difference, though, comes when you pass away, because that trust doesn't die. Cheekily, that's why we sometimes call it a living trust. We say the trust doesn't die, the trust stays alive even past you. But mechanically, the way it works is that the trust becomes its own entity. When you pass away after you set up a trust, that trust becomes irrevocable. And now from a tax standpoint, from the IRS standpoint, that trust is now its own distinct legal entity. So when you die, but you have a properly funded living trust, as far as the probate court is concerned, as far as the government is concerned, they're going to see, wow, Jim Bob died and he had all but $1,000 in his checking account. $1,000, that's not enough to worry about a probate court. His family can just go and collect that money. The difference, though, is that Jim Bob had a revocable living trust set up. He had his house titled in there. He had his large savings account in there, and maybe he had an investment account in there. So while Jim Bob's personal estate only had $1,000 in it, his revocable living trust, his trust estate, had, let's say, $750,000. Now that trust is still alive, so that trust does not have to go through a probate court system. So whoever Jim Bob picked to take care of the trust assets after his death, that person is going to be what's called the successor trustee. They're going to manage it, and they're going to do what the trust says. And the trust at that point is going to say, gather up all the trust assets, put them in one spot, pay off any last bills and expenses, and then distribute those to the beneficiary or beneficiaries, whoever Jim Bob ultimately decided to pick. So to answer the question, how exactly does a trust avoid probate? The trust avoids probate by not dying when you do. The trust stays alive, the trust holds the assets, and the trust will say, upon the death of Jim Bob, in my example, the successor manager has to do A, B, and C, and that's gather the assets, pay off the bills, and distribute to the beneficiaries. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and ring the little bell to stay up to date. Otherwise, we'll see you again soon.